Today we're asking the big questions. Is it EOS or EOS? ISO or ISO? Bokeh or Bokeh? You know, the stuff that really matters. Let's get undone. Gerald Undone. He's crazy. What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Alright, so photography mispronunciations. Let's start off with one that's actually kind of a bonus and isn't actually something that's mispronounced, but I think is misunderstood, and that's RAW. Despite it being done all over the internet, RAW files shouldn't be capitalized. And by that I mean the word RAW. If you were to say, do you shoot in RAW? Don't write RAW in all capitals. RAW doesn't stand for anything, and it's not even a common file extension. And even if it was your file extension, you shouldn't be capitalizing anyway because file extensions are written in lowercase, like .mp4, shouldn't be written .M, P4. Now there is actually a .raw file extension, but you're more likely to encounter .cr2, .rw2, .nef, etc. So basically, stop writing RAW in all caps. Now JPEG, on the other hand, is a different story. It also has file extensions like .jpg and .jpeg, but if you're referring to the compression method as a whole, it actually does stand for something, Joint Photographic Experts Group, and so you should capitalize it, but not RAW. RAW is just like saying raw meat, and you wouldn't capitalize that. Okay, now let's get into the mispronunciations. And no, we're not going to be covering the Nikon Z series because that largely depends on how you pronounce the letter Z, which changes from region to region and is remarkably uninteresting. Instead, our first case is going to be Canon's EOS series of cameras. Now this one's named after a Greek titaness, Eos, who was also the goddess of the dawn, which seems kind of fitting for a product rooted in photography, which in Greek means drawing with light. But it gets more complicated because according to Canon, EOS also stands for electro-optical system, and many people read this out as an initialism, EOS. And I don't blame those people because Canon also decided to capitalize all the letters rather than leave it in its original case. But it still can't be right to say it as an initialism if it's named after a Greek goddess. In order for it to be an initialism, it can't be based on a word because if it's based on a word, it becomes an acronym and you're supposed to say it out, in this case, EOS. And so personally, I think that whole electro-optical system thing is actually a reverse acronym where they tried to apply meaning to a word that they already wanted to go with, which was EOS from Greek mythology. And the modern Greek way of pronouncing it would be with a bit of a step up on the second syllable, so EOS.
EOS.
And I say modern Greek because the Ionic or Homeric Greeks would have you pronouncing it as like Eos or Heos, but EOS is fine. And in case you don't believe me, here's a clip of the president and COO of Canon USA pronouncing it EOS.
EOS 5D Mark II, EOS R system, the EOS R.
Alright, let's move on to another similar case, but with ISO. Now this one also has Greek roots and is also misidentified as an initialism. Now ISO in cameras these days isn't quite what it was in film days, but the general notion is that it's a standardized way of equating things across the world, and in this case done by the International Organization for Standardization. And that should set off some flags right there, because if it was actually supposed to be an initialism, wouldn't it be iOS and not ISO? And wouldn't it change from country to country depending on the language? In fact, the organization actually addresses this and puts this argument to rest on their website by saying, because International Organization for Standardization would have different acronyms in different languages, iOS in English, OIN in French, our founders decided to give it a short form, ISO. ISO is derived from the Greek isos, meaning equal. Whatever the country, whatever the language, we are always ISO. Of course, they probably mean initialism and not acronym because like we were saying earlier, an acronym is when you pronounce it like a word. And also it's peculiar that they changed it from the original Greek because it's not pronounced isos, but isos. But either way, they clearly state that they want to be called ISO, despite them taking a Greek word and putting it in all uppercase just like Canon did with EOS. But nonetheless, we have an answer. It's ISO. Alright, let's step away from Greek and move on to Japanese with our final word, Bokeh. Now this one doesn't have any complicated issues with its origin or letter case, it's just more that people aren't really familiar with pronouncing Japanese words. The trick is to separate the syllables and hit them hard. The easiest way that I can describe it, it's like saying okay in a choppy way. Okay, Bokeh.
Bokeh.
The two common mispronunciations are bouquet, where you drag it on too long and try to tie it together almost like you're trying to say bouquet of flowers, and then the famous bokeh, which is just wrong. Now there's another element of confusion when it comes to bokeh, and it has to do with its definition. Bokeh is the aesthetic quality of the blur in the out of focus components of an image. It's not the quantity of blur. What I mean is that you can't have more or less bokeh, but you can have good or bad bokeh. What you really mean is that you want larger circles of confusion or shallower depth of field or bigger blur balls, but not more bokeh. What you want out of your lens is pleasing bokeh. Bokeh that's nice to look at. Now you know why the expression, I want more bokeh, is just all kinds of wrong. Now keep in mind that this video is just for fun, and so if a client were to say to you, I want more bokeh, you would probably know what they mean, and so they would have succeeded at communicating their message. I think that it's a good thing to be accurate and as informed as possible, but being pedantic to the point of hurting communication is definitely not a good thing. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you found this video helpful or at least entertaining. And if you did, make sure you leave it the old thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you did not find this video helpful or entertaining, feel free to hit the dislike button twice. Now, all right, I'm done.